Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Again, as I mentioned, when you were lollygagging in, you can sit anywhere you wish. We kind of dash around here during this presentation, which we did at 1 o'clock to probably about 220 people or so, which was really wonderful. If you're wondering how long this goes, it's about 6 hours. And so the one at 1 o'clock went, well, just 5, so don't worry. It's about an hour and 10 max, huh? And so make yourself at home. And it's going to get cooler in here now, too, because I asked someone to close those back doors and keep the humidity out there instead of in here. For visitors, my name is Lynn Trapp. I work in liturgy here and the director of music, so director of liturgy and music. And this great sanctuary renovation included from the start in the vision this glorious pipe organ. It wasn't a final thought or anything. It was all packaged from the beginning as the integral plan. You know, in the musical world, the organ is really known as the king of instruments. I see some nods already. You've heard that. That's not downsizing any other instrument that someone might play, or the voice or anything. But it's called the king because it has so many, the capacity of its tonal colors and trumpets and flutes and everything. It's trying to be the orchestra, and that's why it's called the king. So much so that in the Roman Catholic Church documents, it actually says that the organ is to have pride of place, have pride of place in our liturgy documents of the Roman Catholic Church. We take that seriously here in this project. This instrument really is a great gift to St. Joseph, the Archdiocese, the regional community, et al. For many, many decades to come. Soli Deo Gloria, to God be the glory, no one else. This is the glorification of this instrument, but all for the glory of God. Tonight, we're just going to learn a little sort of outline of the design, the architectural design of the organ, its tonal palette, the cockpit, where you see pipes, how all this comes together. And it's at least a sketch and a start. As with any discipline or any career discipline and study, you have a nomenclature, right? You have certain words and such. There's a lot of words tonight and a lot of organ builder lingo, but these guys make it very user-friendly. And every time I learn something when I'm working with a session like this. I'd like for you to hold in mind these dates. If you've been looking at the bulletin, you already have them right here. So when people come up to you and say, well, what about this organ? When we were going to hear this thing? That's what they come up to me and say. I said, are you reading the bulletin? What bulletin? And so the bulletin of the church, and it has had in there again, Saturday, August 31, 4 o'clock Mass, the first time with Father Rick will bless this instrument. And then the doors are open to hear the whole thing we start using in the liturgy. September 8, got it? September 8th, Sunday, 4 o'clock. Also, I'll play the inaugural recital on this instrument. It'll involve a little bit of singing, so don't be afraid. And that's a free event. October 6th, that's a big event. So that's an orchestra of 35 or 38 up here with this instrument. And there's a Bach in Baltimore will be here. We're doing 2 big works. I even have posters from them just this afternoon for that program. So I'd really want all of you to go back home to your computer tonight, type in bachinbaltimore.org and buy tickets right now, all right? And bring all your friends, because that's what we're going to need. Most of these are free, but that one is not. And then other programs through the year, including February 9, where the first trumpeter of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra will be here with me playing a concert, and. This is part of making this instrument manifest. And remember, this instrument is designed for liturgy and concert. For liturgy and concert. If you have the resources that we did in this particular project, and that's thanks to these people right here I'm looking at and this parish, that then we're able to really, really get the full gamut of an instrument such as this, and it can play the entire liturgy, congregational song, soloists. It can play with the piano. It will meet the match of any great concert organist in the country. You get our drift. It's been a great opportunity for me to be able to work with committees and such, especially the Peragallo organ firm from Paterson, New Jersey. From East Coast to West Coast and West Coast to East Coast, these gentlemen have, this lovely family and brilliant family, have built instruments and maintained them across the country. Many years ago, I got to know their work because of my work in the national church music scene. And then many years later after that, when I was making a recording at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, there were many guys crawling around in the organ case while I was practicing, and our recordings were taking place at 3 in the morning, and that was the Peragallo firm. So they were rebuilding the entire organ at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. They have done some marvelous big instruments in recent years. I performed on their new instrument at the Cathedral in Phoenix, and there's just others, and they're doing magnificent work. Organ design, you know, when somebody says, wow, we're building an instrument of this stature, some people say, well, what catalog did you pick it out of? Right? They just think you go back to Montgomery Ward somewhere and pick it out of there, and they say, I want that one on page 14. And it just doesn't work that way. So these instruments are all tailor-made. There's not another instrument like this one in the universe, and I don't want there to be. This is completely, again, tailor-made. All the decisions about the sounds you hear, what you see, the room, the decor, all of that comes to play with the Peragallo firm. They're great architecturalists. They are fabulous organ voicers and on-site installers. You got it. Every detail is tailor-made. So in the last several weeks, sometimes there'd be up to 12 people here working on this instrument, and back there you see some pipes, you see it here. And then the next day maybe 4, then 2, and then all at once 10 again. And they have their punch list organized so well, it's really quite amazing. It's not behind for 1 hour, and they are on the final stretch. That's why you're here now. We're in the final stretch. So day and really night, every evening, or many of the evenings, I would come in, and after they're finished with their work, we sit together here for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it takes. We go through everything they did, and we together sign off on it, we talk about it, and that's how we make this vineyard of wine. Okay? This is a fine wine artistry, and this masterful instrument is certainly exemplary of that. This is not my first rodeo. It's obviously not their first rodeo, and just a great joy to work with them. We ask that tonight maybe you can hold your questions to the end so that it's a little less than 6 hours, but probably maybe 3, 4 questions, and then you can come on round, and if you want to come on over and look at the cockpit and ask some questions. That's what happened at 1 o'clock. Tons of people who are really wonderful, and a lot of people stood around afterwards and had questions. We're going to do that as part of the session at the end as well. All right, so we've got those dates in hand, right? And I know when John gets up here, he's going to say we're going to have a test. So August 31, September 8, all the masses, October 6, you got it. We want you here. Bring your friends. This is a great gift to the parish and this entire region. So the brains behind this, right, the big Peragallo family, they can tell it best from left to right. We're honored to have here John III and his son, John IV.
Thank you, Lynn. Love the wine reference. It's Italian wine. My brother makes wine. We make a little wine, so it's a good thing. This is my son, John. I thought we'd start out tonight with a little history of the Peragallo Organ Company of the family. It started with my grandfather. And his father was a merchant marine captain sailing between Genoa and New York City. And he brought the family over sometime before 1900. And they landed in New York City. And he settled in the East Village. And of course, like all good Italian families, they went into the restaurant business because we know food best, right? So John did not want any part of peeling potatoes or cooking or anything to do with the restaurant business. So he started working for the owner of the tenement building they were living in, and he was working actually for Ernie Skinner. Skinner was the preeminent American organ builder of the time, a real genius. He invented many of the orchestral stops on the organ where you're imitating specifically the French horn or the English horn or the flugelhorn or different stops. And he was a real genius and innovator. And My grandfather loved working for him. He was doing a lot of maintenance work in New York City, and they sent him up to Boston to learn the trade at the factory, the Skinner factory. So he was up there for a while. He came back and made the big trek across the river to New Jersey and started out on his own in 1918 and formed his own company at that time. Now, a lot of my grandfather's earlier organs very much sounded like Skinner because he came from that vintage. So organs are kind of synonymous with the builder. It's very specific. This is a Peragallo sound. If somebody else was to build this exact specification, it would sound different. And each builder would build it, and they'd all sound different. So it's really a kind of a personal thing as far as the selection of the sounds and the voicing and the tonal finishing that goes into it. Well, my grandfather did great in business, and he was a pure mechanic. He had no musical ability, which is really interesting, no musical background. My grandmother was the fiery redhead, and she played at Carnegie Hall, and she was all about music. So it's a little bit of history there. My father came into the business after he came back from France. He was over there, and in the 50s. And he took the business much further and kind of developed things and took it in a little bit different style than Ernie Skinner. He brought it along more to the Aeolian Skinner company, which is another famous derivative of Skinner. And their tonal director there was G. Donald Harrison from England. And his thinking was not so much orchestral, it was more of a classical organ approach from Europe. So the styles have changed over the years, as has the Peragallo style, to incorporate different ideas along the way. Well, I ended up going into the business. I have an engineering background and play in church, and we use a lot of the music that Dr. Lin composes. So when I told my choir I was coming down here, they were all excited. But it's just the best stuff. And my brother Frank is a master woodworker, and he's also a great chef. He was here because we had the B&B for the crew for the last 5 weeks. And he'd leave the job around 3:30 and cook for the crew. And then everybody works till 7. They go back there and eat, and everybody stays together. So it's a good process over the years. Frank is great with the woodworking. Him and John were involved in the design of all of the moldings and the details and all of those things that you see in the 3 caseworks. Well, the next generation has joined us in the business. My son John, he has his background in architecture, his master's from Catholic U. And my nephew Tony is a graduate of Montclair in Jersey, and he very much is involved in the tonal finishing of the pipes and the construction, getting everything in place. So we're going to talk about tonal finishing in a second. I also had my son Ronnie down here with his construction company because there was a lot of different aspects to this project as far as hanging things on the wall and building things in and all of these kinds of things. So very much a family business. I think my grandson was here too for a while. So you had the whole 5 generations here going on, right? So a lot of fun. So anyway, I thought we'd start out with talking about how a pipe organ works. It's a wind-blown instrument, the king of instruments, as Dr. Lin talked about before. And Ernie Skinner used to say that its magnificence lies in its sustained bass, of which there's no peer in the orchestra. I'm just going to have John sit on a low C pedal here to give you an idea. Because it's a wind-blown instrument, you could hold that C down forever, and it's going to go on and on and on and on and on. And the orchestra, when they're with the basses and all, eventually they run out of the string, they had to come back in this. But you can just stand on this and the sound is there. And that's what makes pipe organs really, really different from everything else. Besides that, you're actually moving air inside the church, and you could feel that, right? A little bit of that kind of sound there. But that's all about the pipe organ. So the instrument starts with the wind system. And there is a centrifugal fan blower downstairs in the basement. And the air comes up from there through a big PVC conductor into the bottom of the casework. Do we have photos?
Yeah, actually.
I think we have some photos for this here. And it immediately goes into the bellows. There's a series of bellows with each section of the organ. The bellows are like your lungs. It has the air ready for if you want to, make a big noise or take a breath or not. So it's all about sustaining the wind. And you can see in the picture over there, there's the bellows with the spring on the side to regulate the pressure. So when the organist needs more air, the spring will take up and keep the sound nice and even.
Yeah, if you could imagine the human body has all these different systems. You ever seen a diagram of the nervous system of a human, how all the different connections go from these big tree trunks down to, I don't want to get in trouble. So you have the big volume of air that comes out of the blower downstairs, and that gets broken up into a number of different branches, and that gets distributed throughout the organ, and then gets stepped down, much like an electrical step-down transformer, where you're taking a large volume of air at high pressure, and you're bringing it down to a smaller volume at a lower pressure. And the ways in which these regulators that you see here in these pictures, they have the springs on the sides of them, these big boxes, they act as the lungs of the instrument. And the more we demand of the organ, the more pipes we play, those valves will open up further and further, and allowing the tone to stay and remain sustained. And so you don't ever get a dip in pitch, and we were able to sustain a note for hours upon hours. There's a John Cage exposition right now. It's in I think it's in its, I can't remember the year it's in right now, but they've been holding one note for like almost 2-3 years, and there's a plan for many more years to just change the chord at a particular calendar date. But anyway, along those lines, those reservoirs, you have a number of them situated all underneath the pipework. So if you can imagine the organ right here in a number of layers, you have your bottom layer here, and that's where most of the pedal pipes and the lower tones of the organ reside. And they climb up in utilizing the vertical nature of the building. And then in the middle third, there's a shelf that actually goes back over the sacristy, or towards the sacristy. And that houses all the mechanism of the instrument. That's what you're kind of looking at in that picture right there. It's just a little swatch of that. And within all of those, within that layer, you see about 3 or 4 different reservoirs that take the higher pressure air and distribute it up to the next layer, which is the pipework.
So the air comes out of these bellows, goes into what we call the wind chests. So just below the pipes you see here, that would be the wind chest. The wind chest contains the valve opening mechanism, and it's a sealed unit, okay? And it's all set and ready. As soon as the organist hits the chord, the valves open up, allow the air into the pipes, and we have wind-blown pipes. Here's a shot of the one chamber. This chamber is the solo chamber, which is over on this side over here. So you're looking at the black louvers there. You could just about see them in back of the grow work there. So that's going backwards. And you can see all the pipes in the solo division sitting on the wind chests. Okay? So we have the blower, the motor, we have the bellows, and we have the wind chests. So now we're going to move into the actual pipe work.
So in a pipe organ, it's built upon a number of different fundamental principles. And before we get into the different pipes, I just want to explain the building block of an organ is what we call a rank, R-A-N-K. And so when you talk about how big is my pipe organ versus your pipe organ, people are going to ask you, and you're going to give them a description of the number of sets of pipes within your instrument of a particular architecture or voice. And so my father's going to demonstrate one rank of pipes on an instrument. When you pull one of those knobs on the side, and Dr. Lynn's going to get into it, it turns on one rank of pipes. And that rank of pipes starts out, if you can imagine the inside of a piano, how the strings taper down. They start at 8-foot pitch, and then they begin to, as you go up the scale, they get shorter and shorter. And in a pipe organ, one rank or one type of architecture pipe starts out, if you pull on an 8-foot knob on the console, the lowest pipe on the keyboard is actually 8 feet tall, from the mouth of the pipe all the way to the top. Now, the lower the pipe, or the taller the pipe, the lower the pitch. The shorter the pipe, the higher the pitch. And so my father just ran up the scale on an 8-foot set of pipes. And what I want him to do first is show you the full range of frequency that an organ can emit. And so he's going to start down at a 32-foot pitch. and he's going to range that all the way up to the tiniest pipes of the organ. You can feel that the 32-foot pitches are more tangential in nature. You really feel them in your chest. And as you get up and towards the 4-foot pitches and the 2-foot pitches, it's a little bit more directional, and you can start to feel how that could guide you musically. And that's how a little bit, we're going to get into the layering of an instrument, how you build the layers of the organ up next. So you heard that last one. We were tuning those notes. Monsignor's dogs all started barking. it was a good week to tune and voice those ones. So within an organ's pipe ranks, you have 4 different types. The first type is what we call the principal pipe. And 3 of those types operate in a very similar manner in which they are called flue pipes, F-L-U-E, like a chimney flue. And what happens when you hold a note on the keyboard, air enters the toe of the pipe, travels up through the foot of the pipe, and interacts with the mouth of the pipe. And at the base of the mouth here, you have a lower lip, and you have an upper lip right above it. And then inside the pipe, there's like a sheet that exists. It's called a languid. I'll walk around, and you're more than welcome to come up and look at the pipes a little closer. But I have a lot of nomenclature to get through. But basically, those two, the lower lip and the languid, they create what we call a wind sheet. If you've ever held a referee's whistle, it's similar in nature to the physics of how that creates a sheet of wind that travels across the upper lip. Once that hits the upper lip, it vibrates, causing the column of the pipe to vibrate, causing the tone of the pipe. Now, the length of the pipe determines the pitch. This, at the top of the pipe, is called the tuning collar, and we'll adjust these to make sure that the organ is all in pitch, much like a piano tuner would adjust the tension of the strings. And we do that for every pipe on the organ. So the principal pipe is the basis organ tone. Everybody hears an organ play, and they know that sound, that, oh, that's a pipe organ. And what you're usually hearing is the principal rank of pipes. And when you go to build an instrument's layers, you start with the 8-foot tone, and then you'll build upon it a 4-foot tone and a 2-foot tone. If you know, Pythagoras had his harmonic structures that he had built. And we use much of that same mathematical language in how we structure and build the pipes of the instrument. And then we start to use them tonally. And just like in a choir, you have your basses, your tenors, your altos, your sopranos. The organ choruses get built in very similar manners. So if I was going to hold a little note of an 8-foot, and he's going to layer on a 4-foot and a 2-foot, and you'll hear this triangle or this pyramid of sound start to build. And then it finishes with the mixtures, which are the really bright tones of the instrument. Now there are, on this instrument, there's at least a dozen different types of choruses that we've gone and built through. But the basis of those choruses are the diapason choruses. So the next type of pipe I'm going to go through is the string pipe. Before you go, yeah. Talk about how
Pipes are made.
Oh, right. So this is very important. This is why pipe organs take so long to build, is that they are still made in the same fashion they were hundreds of years ago. We still do everything by hand in terms of how the pipes are all built, from the beginnings of melting the different combinations of metals and the way we lay them out and draw the metal sheets to get the same consistency on enough metal to make a rank of pipes. Then once we have enough metal that where we could cut all the different pipes out, we put patterns all over them, much like a dressmaker would. You cut all those patterns out, and then they're hand rounded to create the different forms that we have, and then all of these solder seams are all done by hand. And once you have the pipe in its physical built form, then there's a number of things you have to do to make it make music, where you're going to start to shape the amount of air you're going to allow in the toe, the flue opening, which is that chimney flue like we were talking about right here at the mouth, the number of distance between the lower lip and the upper lip. You're going to start to begin to get the pipe to begin to make noise. And you get these very raw form, much like a baker would start to mix ingredients together. We start to get the pipes together all by hand. And this takes a number of months to construct. And specifically, one set of pipes might take a pipe maker, about 2-3 weeks to complete from the beginning of starting to finishing. And that's just one set of pipes. And in this organ, what was the you have 40 different sets of handmade pipes within this instrument. So the pipes can be built out of a whole number of different materials. The principal pipes can be made out of a tin-lead combination, and we'll vary the amounts of each material to get a specific tonality out of it. Sometimes we want a really warm sound, sometimes you want a really bright sound, and we'll vary the different combinations of metal, and or might go to a different type of material just to try to get the flavor we're looking for within that particular set of pipes. So the second type of pipe in an organ is called a string pipe, and I missed the description on a very important one earlier today, but I'm not going to miss it right now. The strings are built very much like principal pipes, and you'll see that there's not much different except the scaling of the pipe. And so they'll make the same frequency, and you hold the same note and it'll put the same frequency out there, but this one will have a much keener sound to it, and it'll have a much more delicate nature to it, just by varying the width of the pipe along the column here. And then you also change a number of different builds at the mouth of the pipe, how we shape all this. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to mimic the different string instruments within an orchestra. So you're going to have basses, you're going to have cellos, violins, and you're going to try and create these more subtle, serene sounds within the organ. One interesting thing about, or one unique thing about strings is that we are able to use what we call a celeste against it. And so you'll have two identical sets of pipes that will operate, and then you're going to tune one of them either flat or sharp against the other rank. And what it does is it creates this beautiful undulating effect. Don't get too carried away, but you can show them the string rank as a unison alone.
This is just the string. This is the viola da gamba. We're going to add the celeste rank to that.
All right. Keep it modest. All right. So you heard that undulation that can exist. And in this organ, there's a number of different sets of celeste where you have two identical ranks of different builds that will create either more keen or more warmer or wider sounds. And then you get this varying oscillation that can happen. And it really is a beautiful tool for Dr. Lin to be able to use throughout the liturgy and to support the Mass. So the next type of pipe in the organ is the flute pipe. And this is the last of the flute family. And the flute pipes come in all different shapes and sizes. They can be a little bit like the diapason pipe, where the mouth is built a little bit differently, where it creates like an open flute kind of sound. If I could show you one on maybe the flute veneziano on the solo. So that's an open flute. It has a really beautiful nature to it, and it's not the same kind of sound as the principal. It has a completely different job within the organ and how it functions. Then the next type of flute is a cap flute, and you have a couple sets of these in the organ. This one lives in your swell division, which is a room of pipes, and I'll get into that next after I get through the pipe work. And this has what we call a chimney on it, so it's called a roar flute, or
It's actually inverted.
yeah, so this is an inverted chimney where the chimney actually lives within the pipe. So you can see that upside down like that. And so sometimes they stick out the top, sometimes they stick in, and that all changes the type of sound we're looking for and shapes the characteristics of it. So this actually cancels out the even harmonics of the pipe if you're looking for the details of it. But basically, a 2-foot pipe is actually only 1 foot in height by capping it. And in some instances, like in the harmonic flute on the grate, it does the opposite. You actually take a 4-foot pipe, you poke a hole in it, and it takes a 4-foot pipe, makes it speak at a 2-foot pitch. But it also, by doing that, gives it this beautiful traversing air sound that travels through and over the pipe. And it's a beautiful solo voice to lead with. Another set of pipes that's very unique in your organ is the doppel flute. And this is, sometimes these are called Bordens if they only have one mouth. But in this particular instance, and in your solo division, you have 2 mouths. So the double flute, the doppel flute. And this is made out of a sugar pine. It has a little stopper in it to, again, cancel some of the harmonics out and give it a very unique tonality to it.
Actually, all of these pipes are actually taken from the organ here.
Yeah, so these are the ones here. I'm holding your pipes, so we got to be real careful.
See, this is right here is where the missing doppelflute is here. So the doppelflute is a little bit bigger. It's a big mellow kind of flute.
The flutes, so we went through the principals, the strings, and the flutes. And the last of the families of pipes.
Let's put the
mutations
in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so into a little more detail. The flutes sometimes have some cousins that we will pair with them to create effects within the voice. So you'll pair it within a harmonic of the unison, we call it. So if I was going to play a unison pitch, which is basically a standard C that you'd hear on any instrument, then he's going to pair it with a Nizard or a 2 2/3 or
okay,
keep going. And you can hear the chorus it builds within one note being held. And so it's kind of like having a chorus under one finger. And so you're playing 4 pipes at the same time to give it a very unique melody kind of nature to it, a leading kind of ability. So you have a number of different cornets in the instrument. When you hear those odd harmonics in there, we call that a cornet. And so that's I think, did I miss anything yet?
Doing good.
Okay, moving on.
Doing good.
So the last family is the reed family. And if you've ever played the saxophone or the clarinet or the oboe in the orchestra, it has a little bit of the same physics as those particular instruments. Again, the air enters the toe, the pipe travels through what we call the boot instead of the foot on this time. And then it interacts with what we call the shallot. Now the shallot is this brass cylinder that sits within here. And if you can see, there's it's hard to see from a distance, so I invite you to come up and take a look later, but you can see there's a little brass reed tongue that sits along the shallot. The shallot's a lot like the roof of your mouth, and the reed is more like your tongue. And the relationship when the wind blows through that creates a tone. Now there's a little reed wire here that sits along the reed to change the pitch and the amount of reed that will vibrate, and that's how we tune these particular pipes. And it's all held together in there with a little brass wedge. Once that sound begins and it emanates, it travels through the resonator of the pipe. Now in a reed pipe, there are a number of different variables that we will change to create different types of reed sounds. So in this particular example is a trumpet, which has a very steady conical architecture to it. And we'll change the amount of scroll will open up and close here to vary the volume of the pipe. And then we'll also shape the amount of bend on that reed tongue to get a specific enunciation and attack every time you touch the key, the amount of time it takes for you to hear that sound. And that's part of the voicing process, which I'll get into next. So yeah, that's the great swell trumpet. That's the swell trumpet. And so when you start to vary some of the design of some of these elements, and so these are building block elements, the shape of the shallot, the shape of the resonator, the amount of air you're blowing within it, you start to get different types of trumpet sounds. And so you'll have wider, richer trumpets, then you'll have more keen. Yeah, go ahead. So take them through a wide trumpet, maybe up in the solo. So it's more like a tuba. So you can hear that there's a slight difference in each reed, and as you build choruses within each of those, it gives completely different effects within different types of usages. So, and then the crowning trumpet within your organ actually resides in the back, and that's what we call the trumpet en chemin, which essentially lays down horizontally and projects the tone directly out. And this is the one that most of the brides love. This is the one we save for the feast days, and it's a very triumphant tone. In this particular example, it's called the herald trumpet, the trumpet of the angels, correct? So it's a very powerful tone, but at the same time, it's meant to lead. It's not meant to, be too much. And so it's a delicate balance to get that all right. So that's how most of the pipes. I didn't get to the softer reeds,
Let's go
which
through your
in the swell division,
reeds.
we could talk about some of the softer reeds in the instrument. And these all have different architectures You're going to go to the swell first, to the oboe? The oboe's architecture has a different conical shape of the resonator, and it has a cap on it to create that honed nature to the sound.
How about the tremolo, John?
Yep, and so when you take the reservoirs that we just showed you pictures of, and you oscillate the air with what we call a tremulant mechanism, it creates a vibrato effect within the rank of the pipe. And so my father's going to sample that right now. You can hear that tremulant, that vibrato, and it's a beautiful way to create that particular tonality. So in the swell division, there's also a stop called the vox humana, which is the imitation of the human voice. In the architecture, this particular stop takes advantage of all the things I was talking about with the flutes and combines them all together. The caps, it has different portholes in it, and it creates this imitation of a human chorus. And it's a beautiful thing to layer in with the strings of the instrument to create a really warm, wide, rich sound. Another stop on the organ, you could go to the clarinet, and the solo is of a particularly great vintage of stops. The build of this clarinet has a bell at the top of it. Really,
actually, you have it in the picture.
Yeah, so you can see it in the picture. It's the one that resides all the way towards the shade louvers. It's the tallest one in the division towards the front. And you can see how the architecture of the pipe, the straight cylinder all the way to the top of the resonator, and it flares out right at the top.
So this would be the biggest pipe.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful round sound within the instrument. And then there's a couple different variations of a clarinet that exist within the instrument. And then it goes to, so you have where are you going, the crumb horn?
English horn.
Oh, the English horn. So you have two sets of pipes in here that my father said, my great-grandfather started with Ernie Skinner. He designed the architecture of these pipes in his shop. And so these types of sounds is what you're hearing, that he's very famous for, really warm, rich, romantic kind of sounds to them. There's your French horn. And then, yeah.
The dulcian.
So within the organ, you have all these different groups of pipes. Did we get through all the reeds? I think so. There's the bigger ones. My father could maybe sample.
Yeah, we have the reeds that you play with the pedal keyboard.
Right.
Are very large.
Those are the
because
very
you use
large
those
ones.
when you're playing the French staccatas and those big things like that. And there's a couple varieties of those.
That's a 32-foot frequency you just heard there. The reeds are built within their own choruses, and much like maybe I keep getting in trouble under the dome. So the reeds all build up in choruses, just much like the flutes or the strings, and they're all grouped within what we call divisions. And so right now, where you're looking at in the picture on the wall is the solo division, and what that means is that all those pipes reside within one enclosed space. And so on the front organ here, you have three major divisions that span the top third of the organ. On your right-hand side is the solo division, and that's what you can see in the picture there. And that also has that doppelflute family you can see right there in the wooden set in the front, and then a number of larger stops within the instrument as well. Right in the middle, behind the wall, is the great division. And the great division is filled with, it's not an enclosed division, it speaks within the church proper openly. And those pipes within that division have a particular job to lead congregational singing. And then on the left side here is the swell division. The swell division has a number of very unique sounds within it, but at the same time is meant to begin to support the choir, which is why it resides on the left side here in this particular space.
So each of these divisions kind of corresponds to a keyboard, okay? The solo actually plays from the top keyboard, as does the swell division, okay? So you have the ability to separate them and choose what you'd like to do. The great division lives on the center keyboard. On the bottom keyboard is the choir division, which is located over there. Now, when we're designing an instrument, we came into this church here, the first priority is going to be congregational singing, accompanying congregational singing, right? So that's why we really needed to position the great division in a spot where we would come over the top and we could play a nice full sound without everybody saying it's too loud or anything like that. So the great is really for the congregational singing. The swell is normally for accompanying the choir, but in this particular architecture, you can't use the swell to accompany the choir because you'd hear that first, and the choir would say, "You're drowning me out," right? Which would make a lot of sense. So that's why we positioned the choir division, which is the bottom keyboard, over there, so you could put that behind the choir, so Dr. Lin could balance and the choir could hear and be right on pitch without having to worry about hearing something that's coming from over here. So hence the different locations. It's kind of a functional kind of thing. The other division of the organ is the gallery division, which also contains a diapason and a principal chorus for congregational singing. So Dr. Lin could start with the great division. On the second verse, he could switch to the principal chorus in the back to get a little variety and lots of accompanying tools. The big trumpet is back there too. So that's 4 divisions, right? So solo, great, swell, choir, gallery. Then we also have the pedal division, which is kind of in back of the wall here. The pipes go all the way up. You can see them if you look on the side, and those are all the bass pipes. And we also have a gallery pedal division back there. So it's a separate pedal to go with the gallery, some stops to reinforce the bass back there. Now, expression. Now, just 1 second before we get to expression. When you're looking at the console itself, all the stops, the draw knobs on the side are the sounds. Okay, the oboes, the clarinets, everything is on as a different pitch and they're all on the side. Okay, the couplers run right across the top there, that row of tabs, and that allows you to connect the keyboards together. So if you want the sounds on the swell to play from the bottom, you could use the coupler there and all of these couple it to the pedal. There's accelerator pedals, it looks like in the bottom there, and they're marked solo, swell, and choir. And they operate sets of louvers, like Venetian blinds, which are right in back of the screen here. Now you can see it in the picture. John did a little video here of the louvers working there. So the organist can control the position of the louvers and allow so much sound to come out, and it really controls the volume. So you're able to accompany your singers and just constantly respond to exactly how much sound you need. So you could have a lot of pipes roaring in that chamber, but if you have the louvers closed, it sounds like it's a mile away. So it's kind of really interesting sound. So that's what expression is all about. So on this organ here, you have all of these expressive divisions. Really, the great and the gallery are the only 2 that are non-expressive. So if you put those sounds on, that's what you get. But if you put on these other sounds and these other divisions, you could control it with the volume, with the expression pedals. Okay, where are we? Let's see. We talked about divisions. We talked about a little bit about pipes before we finish up. There are 40 sets of pipes in the order, 40 ranks, okay? And rank usually has 61 pipes, 61 keys on a keyboard, and so it's 61 pipes for each rank. So you have 2,400 pipes, and all of those pipes were tonally adjusted in the last 2 weeks for this acoustical environment. And each night, Dr. Lin would come in and listen to the work that we did and say, well, maybe just a little loud, a little soft, and make some minor changes and start over the next day. But it's a process, and it's taken about 2.5 weeks just to go through the tonal finishing part of the process. The construction in the shop was 7 months, 8 months maybe. The planning was for several years. Then the actual facade was installed for the dedication of the church, and so we had the facade, but we didn't have everything else going on. And then they came in, and it took about 2 weeks to actually install wire things up, get things going, and then we've had about 2.5 weeks now of tonal finishing, just adjusting the pipes for this acoustical environment. Now, in an organ like this,
Turned on.
go ahead.
I got you. All right. You got it. Okay.
So this is actually a picture of the caseworks starting to being built at our factory. So you can see how every single piece within your organ is handmade. We bring all our lumber in off the shelf, and it's all custom designed or custom and handcrafted to the design that we worked with your architect and your liturgical designer and Father Rick and Dr. Lynn here to create. So every single piece within this organ is custom built for this particular architecture. Right now, these are the two caseworks in their raw form. That's all the mahogany. So this is the chancel division before it's outfitted. It's just coming off the lumber racks, and then this is your console in the console shop before it was fitted with any of the electronics and the different draw knobs and the different keyboards that are within it. The factory at Patterson, right now we have a beautiful staff of about 15 craftsmen and another 5 or 6 gentlemen that come to help us with our service work. But each particular person within our staff has an artistry of his own, whether that's metallurgy, whether that's woodworking, electronics, whether that's music, which actually translates right to how the organ tonally is developed. And so you have all these different craftsmen that we're very fortunate to have, and like my father said, we had 12 of them here for about 2 weeks, and the whole organ basically went together pretty quickly. And then once we had it all together, everybody's like, okay, you're done. But really, we just were beginning. And so that's what my father started to say for the past 2.5, 3 weeks. My cousin Anthony, Dr. Lynn, and my father and my uncle have been slowly crafting every specific pipe to sound within this space, and that process takes weeks to do. You have to start by building out the first principle of the organ and making it sound proper for the space. Then you layer on the second set of principles in contrast to that one. Make sure that every pipe within its own rank all sounds harmonious as you go up to the scale, so there's no odd ducts sticking out. And then as you get through that process of building all the different layers up, you start to assess, you start to play it, how is it going to be played, you walk around the space, you listen to it. And that particular craft takes a long time. So while it does look in final form, it did look in its final form like this weeks ago. The past couple weeks, a lot of work has been going on behind the scenes to craft what this organ it sounds like in its totality.
One of the great things working here is the beautiful acoustical environment. I mean, architecturally, everything is gorgeous, but it's really, for us, it's about the acoustics in here. It went from what you had before was relatively dry to this nice environment where everybody's encouraged to sing along because you could hear other people, and the music just kind of floats out. Nothing has to be overwhelming or too loud. The choir is going to sound great projecting from there, but the designers and the architects and Dr. Lynn and Monsignor Rick all deserve so much credit for the acoustical environment here, and it has made our job so much easier as organ builders, because a lot of times you work in rooms where, you know, the sound, you let go and it's gone, and you just hear every little nuance of everything, and it's so difficult to actually make it a homogeneous sound. But this really, really allows us to pull the whole instrument together, whether it's 3 locations and a different number of things. The other thing I wanted to mention before we move on to percussion is some of the pipes in this organ are vintage heritage pipes from other instruments. Okay, so out of the 40 sets, I'm not sure the exact number it is, but the doppelflute, for instance, was made by, it's probably from a 1950s MP Moeller organ. Now, Moeller was right here in Hagerstown, Maryland. They were the biggest organ company in the country in their day. They went out of business sometime in the 80s. And actually, the salesman at that time came walking in here after the last session and was marveling at the organ. He's retired now, but he was happened to be here, and he was like, wow, I can't believe this. This is really great. So the Moeller company was responsible for the doppelflute, and they also built the clarinet, the bell clarinet you saw before. If pipes are properly made in construction, they'll last forever, okay? As long as they're supported in the racks and it's not abused in the tuning process or anything like that, there is no wear and tear on the pipes. So we're able to reuse some of these really beautiful sounds. And like John was talking about before, the process of making pipes hasn't changed. It's still the same right from Jump Street as far as combining the lead and tin together and the mandrels and rolling it all out. So it's a real combination of old world sound as far as that goes. One of the other details on this organ here is the wonderful percussion. What would you like to start with, John? The great chimes. How about the chimes on the grate? It's a set of beautiful tubular chimes. Percussion is always a lot of fun for the organists, right? Reminds you of Christmas sounds, right? Real nice. There's a harp, an organ harp in the choir division over there. Yeah, a lot of times on the organ harps, the action sound of the actual mechanics of the hammer hitting the thing is louder than the actual sound of the harp. So that's what you're hearing here. It's really, really interesting sound. There's a large carillon. There you go. And then one of our favorite sounds is the Zimbelstern. The Zimbelstern is a set of 8 rotating bells, and it gives you a nice jingle, jingle, jingle. It's located in the middle of the casework in the back, and this one includes a rotating design. Yeah. So that would be great with the Glory to God or at Christmas time on one of the verses of the hymns or things like that. The Zimbelstern.
That's the right one.
And yeah, so that's a little bit about the percussion. The other piece of the instrument, before we hand it over to Dr. Lin, I know he's ready to go, but is the technology side. And we talked about the pipes and the wind-blown nature of it, right? But the technology that is involved between the keyboards and the pipes these days is state-of-the-art digital, right? So every key, every stop is on or off. Every position of the expression pedals is being scanned constantly. And all of that information is put in digital format and sent over to the pipes where it gets decoded and plays the pipes, moves the louvers and all of that. So it's really, really state-of-the-art, high-tech as far as that goes. We used to, when I started out in this business, to be a couple thousand wires, telephone cable running from the console to the back, you know, and all of that kind of thing, operating DC relays and all that. So it takes advantage of what we're able to do today and combine it with the sounds of the pipes. Good. So we're going to let Dr. Lin speak here about the console.
There's plenty of names and numbers, right, in all of our lingo here. But a few more things about the console. And I just want to back up also, you see the picture here from from the factory. They set up this entire instrument there first. And every pipe goes through its initial voicing there. In some ways, they're guessing because they've not brought that pipe in here to see what they want to make that soprano, alto, tenor, or bass sound like. But this whole organ was initially voiced in their shop. Then they tear the whole thing down, put it on trailer trucks and bring it down 95, and then they start all over here again. And every pipe then is heard and say, yeah, we were close, but now it needs to, you see, that's really the art of voicing. People, a lot of organ builders make pipes. It's the voicer, right? It's the winemaker. It's the sommelier that makes these instruments. That's what's so beautiful about it. On the console here, even those who are gathered over here, you can already see this is the Celtic cross. So we took the Celtic cross, which of course the Irish immigrant connection to building this parish there, and in the entryway, all the way tied into the Zimbelstern. That too is a Celtic cross that spins, and so we took that design from the minister chairs and so tied that all together. When we say tailor-make, we really do mean tailor-make. So the decisions about the cockpit are such that even when I was up at the shop recently, they say, do you want these draw knobs to face 15% towards you when you're sitting there, 18%, 21.5%, so that you can see all of these, the names on these draw knobs. All those sorts of things are designed by us in tandem. Some of you also may not know about the pedals of an organ. The pedals of an organ are really 2.5 octaves. That means, you know, C to C, C to C, and then C to G, and that may not mean anything to you, and that's okay too. But in any event, it's just another short keyboard, even though it takes up a lot of space, and it's concave. So even in J.S. Bach's time, or the earliest organs of Svelink that started in the Netherlands, they were just sticks. And they were playing chorale melodies with those pedals. They were just the melodies of hymns, and then they were improvising on the manuals above them. Well, we've come a long ways, haven't we? Now, these kind of concave instruments with the pedal division allow us to play smooth and legato. I hate to say like theater organ, but it does have that kind of capacity to do that. So when you come over later, if you're interested, you can see how the pedals are laid out there. The solid state piston action is what it's called, because always the questions are, what are all these knobs and buttons anyway, these 2s and 3s and all this? So this has a memory level system in it. That is that this Sunday, for the first time really, because we're in the final stretch, I'll spend a number of hours in here on Sunday night when everyone's gone except the dog. And I will begin to form the sounds for the September 8th recital. It usually takes me on the road, I usually figure 5.5 to 6 hours for an hour and 15-minute program plus a 15-minute intermission as a concert player. So it takes that long, even with this guy that we designed together, to understand and combine the different sounds. When I come up with a sound I like, I go, bam, that's it. I press S, set, so the button down to the left, and then a number that I want to assign it to, 5, 9, 12, whatever, and then that becomes the sound. So every time you press 12 or 9 or whatever you've assigned it to, that sound comes out. You with me? So that when you have the score in front of you as you're playing as an organist, then you design all those sounds left to right, and you write in your score 2 or 7 or 8 or whatever it might be. And then at that lickety-split moment, you press 7 and that new sound comes on. At that lickety-split second, 9 comes on. And so you see how we have to, as pilots and co-pilots, have to run this cockpit. You are organizing the sounds and the tonal colors, but then you're operating them also. So many years ago, something like that was not even possible. I mean, but now we have what we call that memory level system. There are over 300 levels of memory on this organ that are controlled by these knobs. It's all solid state, log in this and log in that and such. When you're designing a left to right program like that, say October 6th with the orchestra, then I might, who knows, I might use 40 different combination sounds, and I will have entered those here. Instead of me having to remember that I press A7 and 4/6 and all this jazz left to right, all you have to do is down here we operate what we call a sequencer. There's a button down here which we call, again, a toe stud. That's what all these are down here called. And it says next. And there's one on the opposite side that says previous. So as I'm going through my score with the orchestra, then all I have to do is just press next, and it goes to number 7 and 9 and 14. You with me? So you program the entire series of sounds, and then all you have to do is press next, and it goes to that, called a sequencer. This is so far advanced that now in the 21st century, there's even 2 toe studs here. One says page back, and the other one says page forward, and you probably know what that means. We can put an iPad here and download your entire score, and then all you have to do is press that toe stud, and it'll turn the page for you. That's all the Bluetooth interaction and such built into this instrument. Again, 15 years ago, we really didn't know a lot about all that. All of these knobs often duplicate these things here so that when you're flying the airplane, you might be able to get a finger here and do that and a finger there, or maybe you have one of your feet as you're playing that is available and you press 9 down there instead. You get my drift? right? So we're forming, we're creating, and and then somehow we have to make music on this thing too, in addition to flying this Southwest airplane. The names of these stops too, those are a lot of candied items, right? I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of chocolates, right? And so these names, how do you name a flute? Well, different builders have different ideas on that, and they certainly know how a flute traverso sounds, and so we name it that. But even in the last few days, when they were making final decisions here, even with some of the digital sounds, they were renaming some of the sounds because the sound in their shop, they had named a bassetto, and they get in this room and they say, actually, that's a cornetto, or whatever it might mean. I just made that up. So that even at the last stage of winemaking, they might be changing this, this fine wine, the title of these. And then those are forever. In other words, we don't change those knobs once a year just because we want to have fun with it. Those are assigned, and those are the sounds. All of the other intricacies here with the lights and all this and how the bench operates, we design all that. And it really is ad libitum, at the pleasure of the performers. Usually the in-resident organist designs that with them. So that really is a decent snapshot of the console. It has enough cord on it that if we took this banister off, it could be moved over here to the center, which it will be for the orchestra concert, October 6th. September 8th, I'll stay right here, stay home. And it has flexibility because it's obviously on a movable console, portable podium. So anything I missed on that, Joe? I think that's it. The last thing I'll say is this, is that the late great artist Michelangelo, who we all know, was fond in saying that when he took a stone and he was asked to form Moses out of it, or an apostle, or whatever, only he had in mind what it could look like, but the Holy Spirit was going to help him chisel that out of it and find it. That he wouldn't go look for a piece of stone and say, I think that's going to be St. Matthew. No, it was the other way around. Here's your stone, go at it. Holy Spirit says, I think we have something in there, and he starts to discover it with his artistry. Same thing here, same thing. You see the connection between the winemaking, Michelangelo, and the artistry of these great gentlemen. All right.
Thank you.
A few things, and then a couple, I don't know why it's doing that.
We've got too many mics on.
Well, it worked perfectly at 1 o'clock, so anyway, all good. So Father Rick's going to have a few things here, and a couple questions.
We have a couple minutes. If anybody has questions, we'll take 2 or 3 questions. Jan. The keys on the keyboard, they don't make keyboards out of ivory anymore. It's been a long time. I think probably
Maple.
plastic, but these are all maple and rosewood.
Maple and rosewood. And then something I meant to mention also, in the late stages now, as a matter of fact, just hours ago, as of last night, they come to me and give me several examples of the key pressure and the sensitivity that can be offered by these keyboards. Now, I've played millions of organs. But then they say, this is what we'd like to suggest, and then out of those 4, I decide. Then painstakingly, John, these guys go into this console, which comes up like this, it flies up, and each keyboard is there, and they go underneath with their fine dentistry tools and make each one exactly the same. It takes hours and hours and hours, and they have done that. According to the touch, as we say, the keyboard touch, the firing point, it's called, when you push a key down right there, and that's all adjusted the way I've decided with them, and they have done an incredible job with it.
The wood that everything's made out of, it also speaks to the design process and the harmonization between our architect for the whole building project, our liturgical design consultant, working with all our various subcontractors, including Peragallo, so that the stain and the woods chosen, the dark mahogany with its stain, was all chosen and coordinated with New Holland Pew Company and the company, the mill workers that did the wood trim and the steps and all around the church, so that everybody was working off the same palette. And so what we end up here with is, the console itself is a work of art. And this combination of mahogany, dark and light mahogany, rosewood and walnut. And it's all handcrafted because they've got their own woodworking studio and it's all part of their craft. John, you looked like you were ready to say something.
No, that's great.
Another question. Pat.
So I have a question about the wooden pipes. Since wood tends to lose moisture in time, how do you account for that?
So how do you account for the wood in the pipes being maintained and not drying out?
So, one of the rather unique, one of the rather unique things about our entry into St. Joseph's was that we were able to come in at the beginning of the design process. And so we were at the table with the architects and the engineers years ago talking about that very topic. How can we create conditioned architecture that the organ will not endure any sort of a unnecessary wear and tear? And so yes, wood in fact in the pipes in the organ can be affected by humidity, but in working through those engineers designing the HVAC systems that went into this place, the way that the air is distributed throughout the organ and the space, we're able to keep that within norms where we don't see that kind of wear and tear take major effect on anything other than maybe you need to tune it seasonally for a little bit of a humidity change.
One of the great things with actually working together right from Jump Street was that we were able to position all of the speaking pipes at the same level in the church, because the air column in the pipe is temperature sensitive, and that's really what the seasonal tuning is all about. So you might want to tune when the heat comes on, when the air conditioning comes on, and those kinds of things there. But with all of the pipes at the same speaking level, it all changes together and the whole instrument stays together. Sometimes you see organs in different places in this where they have double decker or a triple decker, and this is out of tune with the stuff on the bottom because this is heating up first and the heat it's hotter on top and all that. But this has really been a great design right from the beginning.
There was a question earlier today about how long this will last. Well, I don't want to say nothing lasts forever. But we build this instrument for generations to come. Our old instrument, the electronic organ that was here for the past 25 years, it went with us to the multi-purpose room, and then we recently sold it and got some money back for it. That only has a lifespan. Those electronic organs, like a lot of electronic things, they don't build them to be repaired. As you know, these days, they build them to be replaced. A pipe organ is built to last generations. And so if this is well maintained, this will last 100 years, and it will serve the church far beyond any of our lifetimes. When we were starting this project and going through the approval process with the Archdiocese, there were some in the facilities department at the Archdiocese who were questioning our investing in a pipe organ and questioning whether or not it was worth the effort or the expense of doing this. And we got around to liturgical styles and music and the liturgy and who we are here at St. Joseph in our tradition and custom of sacred music. But we got into the question about the instrument itself, and then they said, well, you know, you have a great music director now, but you're not always going to have Dr. Trapp. You know, eventually we retire, we move on, or whatever. And I said, this instrument will now be the attraction for the next generations of gifted, skilled organists and music directors. This will be a point this will be what attracts whoever comes next, whenever that is, which we hope won't be for a long time. But this secures who we are as a parish community and what we value in sacred music and a wide range of musical styles that this instrument will be able to support. Then we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to wrap up. Laura.
With the 3 different locations of the pipes, did you have to make any adjustments for like the latency of the sound?
Absolutely. Yeah, so with we were talking...
The question was, given the 3 different locations where sound is coming from, did they have to adjust for, did you say latency? That's a great word, or delay.
Delay.
Yeah. So you have, as we spoke about a little bit before, the voicing process, and we talked about after you get done with the adjustment of every pipe in that particular day, you spend a lot of time listening. And so my father will sit down on the bench and play. We just had a gentleman here from the company that does the sampled sounds, and they play for hours and hours, and all we do is listen and analyze and assess. And then we'll sit there and say, this needs to be a little bit louder, this needs to be a little bit softer, this particular sound needs a little bit more attack because it's a little bit more distant. Or this one sounds too deep in the chamber, maybe we need to make it a little bit bigger so that it doesn't sound like it's so deep. or maybe this one's a little too far forward, and we need to just calm that down. And so all those adjustments take place every night in conjunction with Dr. Lin.
Dr. Lin came in first night, and we had just started the voicing process, so we were just kind of getting started, and we played the principal on the grate for him. He said, well, I was hoping I'd get a little more body to that. So the next day we came in, and what we had to do is, it was just not a matter of making it louder. We increased the wind pressure, okay, from 3 3/4 pressure to almost little over 4-inch wind pressure. It's blowing the pipes, and my nephew went through and cut up the upper lip of every pipe in that set. So he took a shaving off the upper lip so that the new pressure would actually, the wind sheet would intersect with the upper lip properly, and then adjust it. And the overall effect was to end up with a wider principal sound based on that kind of thing, because that's what he was looking for congregational singing.
Okay, one last question.
Thank you very much. When was the first public performance by this instrument? When was it?
The first public performance of this instrument will be on Saturday, August 31st.
No, yeah, we're not talking about the history. When was it?
Oh, the history of the organ in general. The oldest pipe organ?
How many years ago? Yeah, when the first performance happened?
So
You know about the tabernacle in the Mormon church?
Mormon Tabernacle,
The Mormon
that's at Aeolian Skinner, in the one in Schoenstein. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are famous organs by famous builders, and they get a lot of attention. My grandfather started building in 1918, and his first, by the time he was able to build his first instrument on his own, it was 1929 in St. Michael's Church in New Jersey, and that organ still plays, and so it's coming up on 100 years. So the instruments do last, and the first concert, the inaugural concert, is always a very great event, especially in Europe, and you go to France when you see those kinds of things. So this will be a monumental event on September 8th. And based on the crowd I see tonight and the crowd this afternoon, you better start getting chairs, because it's getting very full in there. So
Build out
it's
these
exciting.
bump outs for
It's really exciting.
it's a fun thing to be part of a family business, moreover a multi-generational family business. I always like to think, and we always joke around within our generations, that we are responsible to build for the next generation, because one day my son's going to be looking at my work, and he's going to be looking at, whether or not I had done it in the proper way, when he's behind the scenes in a place that nobody will ever see in this organ until he's there. And I get to those places from my great-grandfather, and I get to see how he built an instrument that lasts 90, almost 100 years. And it's a wonderful thing to see, all the things that he had that all translated down to my grandfather, through him, and then to me. And I see, I get to see his work in a way just by knowing what he taught me. And it's a responsibility that we hope to bring to here in supporting this instrument. This is, even though we've been here for years designing this instrument, this is the beginning of our relationship with your church. I mean, this is one of our instruments, and it's almost like having another member of the family around, where we feel responsible for its performance and how long this instrument's going to last. So every single thing, right down to the screws, we think about how long will this last? Will it last in its current form? And how can we better serve this parish in every decision?
There's a set of pipes, the ones with the chimneys, the inverted chimney. That set of pipes is one of the ones which is heritage vintage pipe work. It came out of one of my grandfather's organs in Ridgewood, New Jersey, the First Reformed Church. And he built that in the 50s. And so you have a piece of John Peragallo Sr. in this instrument. So it's really, really a beautiful thing.
Well, I want to thank the Peragallo family, Peragallo Organ Company, for their devotion. We've been working with them for more than 5 years, probably longer than that. When we started in on the idea that there was going to be a pipe organ involved in the building project, we interviewed a number of organ builders. But Lynn and I very quickly honed in on Peragallo. We loved what they were about, that they're nearby, they're Catholic family, multi-generational, and it's been a labor of love for all of us to be part of this. So if you go and see the console, you'll see where the Peragallo plate is. You'll see that we are Opus 780. So we're the 780th instrument that Peragallo has built. So we're part of a great heritage. And as I said, they've been with us from the beginning of the design process. So when John Srigley, our architect, and even before CAM Construction came on the scene, Peragallo was at the table with our earliest acoustical engineers who were doing consulting work to help us with the acoustical environment and the acoustical improvements that you all heard. You hear yourselves sing better. The participation, what I hear at the celebrant's chair in prayer and response and singing has been overwhelming and so moving. And that's part of what we were trying to achieve, that it affects the liturgy, it affects how we all pray. And it's certainly going to be how this organ resonates in this space for the glory of God. I also, lastly, want to thank Dr. Trapp. We all know we've been able to benefit from his expertise, his talent over the years. And if you've ever, choir members have certainly seen it, but in the old organ, you rarely got to see just how busy his hands and feet are when he plays. Yeah. When he first got here and the organ was still sunken down in the pit, no one could see what an organist did. But I am amazed when I see him, both feet moving, either pressing toe studs or the crescendos or the expression pedals, what look like the gas pedals, pulling stops, changing registrations, comparing what he's hearing, playing two keyboards with different hands, and at times raising a hand to conduct the choir all at the same time. An organist's mind must be built differently to do all that multitasking so amazingly. I wanted to learn how to play the organ. I never got far enough in piano to make the jump to do all of that. So I marvel at organists. I love organ music. I've been a fan and kind of an organ nerd, but I just can't, my brain doesn't do all those things. I might have trouble walking and chewing gum at the same time. But it takes a different kind of mind to do all of that simultaneously and to do it at the level that Lynn does. We are truly blessed and truly gifted, and I look forward to what we're going to hear. I'm sure some of you may be disappointed that you didn't get to hear more tonight. This is hopefully just to wet your whistle a little bit. So Saturday the 31st at the 4 o'clock Mass. Mass will begin in silence, and the first thing we'll do is bless the instrument, and as the incense rises up through the pipes, Dr. Trapp will give the first sonorous sounds to lead us in singing in the opening hymn of the Mass. And then come back Sunday, September 8th for the inaugural recital, which will really explore all the different tonal capacities and the different moods. It's part of why the organ serves the liturgy so well, because it can speak in the middle of Lent in a different way than it speaks at the Easter Vigil and throughout the liturgy and throughout the liturgical year and the different rituals. That's why the organ, the pipe organ specifically, Lynn said that the organ has pride of place, but what the liturgical document actually says, Sacrosanctum Concilium, says that the pipe organ has pride of place. And we now have an organ and an instrument that is worthy of that place in the liturgy. Doesn't mean that we're not going to use other instruments. All of our other musical styles still remain. We're not abandoning all the rest of that. So, anyway, thanks everyone for coming out. Please feel free to come up and ask other questions. Feel free to walk up into the sanctuary. You can get a closer look at what's up behind the wall or walk around the back.
Get a pen.
You get a pen.
Free pens.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Thank you very much.